record to the computer, and I am going to share my screen. Well, no, I'll share my screen later. All righty. Let's get started then. We'll do a little introductions and then go into it. My name is Reverend Joan Van Beesler, and I'm the former retired director of Unitarian Universalist Justice, Ohio, and she, her pronouns, and I live in Columbus. And I'm going to let Susan introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Reverend Susan Smith. Joan and I are partners in crime here. We've been doing peacekeeping stuff since 2016. I'm the founder of Crazy Faith Ministries here in Columbus, Ohio, and I also do some work with All Voting is Local. And my pronouns are she, her, and I'm going to pass it over to Nazit.
Greetings, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Nazik Hatasha. I'm the Policy Affairs Manager at the League of Women Voters, and I'm excited to join you all.
Great. And I'm going to let Beth Westfall introduce herself. She's one of our veteran peacekeepers.
Hi, I am Beth Westfall. I'm currently serving as an interim Lutheran pastor in Bellevue, Ohio. And yeah, I've done peacekeepers. The first one I did was the last presidential election. I think I've done 3 elections since then, 2 or 3. So this isn't where you want me to talk about a lot of stuff, right?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to have her talk about it at the end so you know what all of this stuff really means. Okay? And now I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. Okay. Well, I like to start with a little quote to set the stage, and this is from Senator Raphael Warnock, Reverend Raphael Warnock. A vote is a kind of prayer for the world we desire, for ourselves and our children. And with that in mind, we'll move through here. Why are we here? To review voting rights and how to really support voters with our pastoral care. To review basic conflict intervention, de-escalation tactics, safety measures that can be applied in tense situations. And it's hoping that you never really need to use them and that your time as a peacekeeper will be very boring or pleasantly conversational. We want to offer alternatives to escalation or calling in the police at the polls if there is an agitated or tense situation. And we want to work through some possible scenarios, talk with Beth a little bit about the reality of this as time permits. Now, what's our role as peacekeepers? Conflict prevention, de-escalation if needed, harm reduction to help provide a safe and calm and friendly voting environment. So we help troubleshoot a little bit that are barriers to voting, such as the curbside voting for those who are unable to go in, non-ambulatory folk. We are a welcoming and friendly face when folk may be feeling a little anxious or tense. We want to mitigate confusion, harm, or risk. So we got to know where the doors are and help people where we can. We want to maintain a safe voting environment, pastoral care, and some more pastoral care as people may get tense during an election. And support conflict mitigation so we don't have police as a first option in conflict. Okay. We know that the 2023 election environment is a bit agitated. There's polarization, we all know that. There's misinformation, disinformation that confuses folk. There may be protests of various kinds, pro, con, whatever. There may be some voter challenges or intimidating flyers. Nazik will say a bit more about voter intimidation and challenges. We may have some questions about Dropbox access at some of the precincts, not precincts, but some of the boards of election. Possible long lines with cranky people. Yes, people get cranky when they stand in lines. Provisional ballots due to the ID law changes and people feeling confused or angry or upset about voting provisionally. Poll workers giving incorrect information. We need to get people over to one of the poll monitors to get the proper information. We see voters with English as second language. Where do I go? What do I do? But we've never had any record of serious or violent incidents, which is great. Annoying, yes. Angry, yeah. Confusing, yes, but never serious violence. Okay, Nazik.
Again, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to walk you through some of the voting logistics during this first part of the call. But before I get into these things, I want you to know that for the most part, this really just is like context setting for you, and that you won't need to like have this information memorized. As Joan previously mentioned, like your priority is pastoral care, potentially conflict mitigation. But you will be part. I'll explain more about this, but you're really part of a team, and there will be other people who are namely poll monitors that are more responsible for knowing all the details about voting and answering voting questions. This is just, again, context setting. So this November 7th, we will have an election day that is a little bit atypical for a odd numbered year. Typically in odd years, there are just local elections for city council, school boards, things like that. But this year we have two statewide issues that are going to be on everyone's ballot. And they are two statewide issues that are particularly contentious, and the first one even more contentious than the second one, namely reproductive health care. And this is, something that we have been seeing all year round. We even had a special election about it. And so the reason that this is important is that, unfortunately, we do expect the controversy around reproductive health care access to be a potential point of conflict where people might be agitated or motivated to suppress the vote of other people if they are so inclined. So it's just something that we need to be aware of. Next slide, please. This is the early voting calendar. We're now in the last week of early voting. I know that all of you may be asked to be on duty on Saturday and Sunday, but most of you will probably be on call during that November 7th. But those are the early voting hours if you are asked to be on duty during that weekend. And on election day, the polls are open from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Next slide, please. So I want to walk you through what the process looks like on election day for a voter. And again, here, we're going to focus on some of the points during the process during which a conflict might arise for any number of reasons. So just things to be aware of. So a person stands in line on election day, and standing in line looks very different all over the state, depending on if you live on an rural or urban area. If you live in a highly condensed area, you might be standing in particularly longer lines. Long lines are a source of kind of agitation for some people, in which they might just be, not their best selves, and, might be a little bit more inclined towards intimidation, or God forbid, just like threatening somebody in some way if they're, set off. And so when we see long lines, we tend to dispatch poll monitors or peacekeepers sometimes if they, we feel that there might be a reason to. And you're just going to be like looking out, making sure that everybody's feeling good and doing well while they're potentially standing in these long lines. So after they stand in line, they get to their turn, and a poll worker identifies that voter in the poll book, and they're supposed to show a valid form of photo identification. For those of you that have not yet voted this year, this is a new Ohio law this year that a person must have a form of photo identification in order to vote in person. For somebody who doesn't know this and they show up without a photo identification, this again might be a point of agitation for them if they are unexpectedly asked to vote provisionally. After they check in, the voter will sign or make their legal mark in the poll book. If a voter has a disability and cannot sign their name, they cannot be forced to sign their name. They can just mark an X or some kind of mark to show kind of their that is them. They're then given a slip and they proceed to a voting machine. You do have a maximum time in a voting booth. It's 10 minutes. People are rarely kicked out of the voting booth, but it is important to know that there is a time limit, but that time limit does not apply to people with disabilities. And then finally, people take that, they are given like the machine typically will give you back that piece of paper and you feed that ballot into a scanner. There is the potential here for a person to be standing in a second line in order to feed your ballot into a scanner. Next slide, please. Next slide. So provisional voting, this is important to know because again, people just might be agitated if they feel like they are not allowed to vote a regular ballot. A provisional ballot is required, or rather is offered to you if your eligibility to vote is questioned. You have the right to a provisional ballot. Nobody in Ohio should be walking away from the polls without voting if they believe that they are eligible to vote. And so they should be offered. If somebody tells you, you know, you're not on the poll, you're not in the poll book for one reason or another, make sure that that person actually does vote a provisional ballot. There is the misconception, unfortunately, widespread seemingly, that provisional ballots don't count. I can assure you 100% that they absolutely do count if that person does what is needed in order to kind of like verify or validate their provisional ballot. So what are some of the potential reasons that a person might be asked to vote a provisional ballot? If they don't have a photo ID, if their voter registration is out of date, if they requested an absentee ballot and didn't use it and they just show up on an election day, they'll be asked to vote a provisional ballot. If their signature does not match, I'll say more about that in a second, or again, any other reason that their name does not appear on the polling list, they would vote a provisional ballot and they should receive more information about next steps. There might be a situation in which they have to come back to the Board of Elections and provide a photo ID or some kind of like further information to verify their ballot. And you should call back to the Board of Elections and make sure that your vote actually was counted. Always call election protection. Advise people to call election protection if they are asked to put in a provisional ballot rather than a regular ballot. If they're not sure, we can help them through that. We can help kind of like provide them the kind of like ease of mind that they, you know, that they indeed that they should be doing provisional ballot or they should have been able to vote a regular ballot. Sometimes poll workers do make mistakes. And we've had to step in at times and tell a poll worker like, no, you know, that they should be able to vote a regular ballot. The reason for that, unfortunately, is because we're finding with these new laws statewide that there is inconsistent training requirements, and not all counties require that poll workers train again if they are if they have done poll work before. But now with the new laws, that's very problematic, right? If there are all these new voting laws and a poll worker has not been retrained, they might not be aware of some of the really important things. Like, for example, a person can now use a passport as a form of photo identification, and that's not something that was true before. I want to say a few words about the signature match before we move on. Signature matches technically are required by state law. However, most poll workers aren't trained in this. Actually, none of the poll workers are properly trained in this, and most do not do like a 100% match, but it's just kind of something that they reference. If a person has a disability or for some reason is like afraid that, you know, their signature might not match the one before it, call election protection if you have any problems, or advise people to say before they sign, I have a disability. And so that signature match, they won't have the requirement that it looks exactly the same. Next slide, please. Voting rights in Ohio, things to know: you have to be allowed to vote if you are in line before the polls close. A person with a disability has the right to vote curbside. They have the right to ask for assistance inside the polling place from poll workers or receive assistance inside the voting booth from a person of their choice. And they are under no obligation for any reason to prove that they have a disability or to mention exactly what their disability is. Polling places are neutral ground. Poll workers cannot wear campaign materials or anything that would influence anybody's vote or make somebody feel uncomfortable voting one way or another. This technically applies to voters as well. Nobody is allowed to campaign within the 100 feet of the polling place unless somebody asks for your assistance. You as a poll monitor or peacekeeper also are not allowed within 100 feet of the polling place. Next slide, please. Voter challenges. Ohio law only permits challenges to the qualifications of voters by a precinct election official. If there's somebody walking the line, and it's happened before, somebody walking the line asking people, are you a citizen? Show me your voter ID, anything like that. On election day, that will not be happening outside of the polling place, and it will not be happening by somebody like walking the line. If you see somebody walking a line asking people to prove that they are eligible to vote, call election protection right away and report them, and try to find an official letting them know that like this person is not actually allowed to be doing that. That is a form of voter intimidation, and it's illegal. Any attempt to challenge a voter by someone who is not an election official, again, is voter intimidation. A voter can be challenged on only one of a few grounds, including that they are not a resident of Ohio, that they're not a U.S. citizen, that they're not of legal voting age, but not for any other reason. And if they are challenged, they have the right to either vote a provisional ballot or to vote a regular ballot and complete an affidavit in which they basically swear that they are indeed eligible to vote. Next slide, please. Who can enter a polling location? Voters, somebody who's assisting a voter, the child, election officials, election observers. Please note that poll monitors are different than election observers. Election observers are appointed by the Republican or Democratic Party or by the issue campaign. We are not those people. And so those people are, again, they are certified to be inside. However, they are just observing. They are not allowed to be communicating with anybody or, influencing people or asking people to prove that they're allowed to vote or anything like that. Police officers and journalists. Next slide, please. Harassment in election law. I will start off by saying this. The basic premise is that if somebody feels like they're being harassed, then they're being harassed. And so don't question yourself. Don't feel like, oh, do I need to ask? Do I need to look this up? Is it actually harassment? If you feel like you're being harassed, if somebody tells you that they feel like they're being harassed, then they're being harassed. But if we're looking towards examples as to like what exactly is noted in the law as harassment, they are these things. And they're just common sense things that anybody would classify as harassment. Obstructing access to a place of voting, whether it be early voting or a polling place. That's a big one that we watch out for because it's become more common, unfortunately, especially during early voting. Engaging in violence against voters or election officials, participating in a riot or any kind of violence, attempting to obstruct a voter from voting in any way, shape, or form is harassment. Next slide. Some examples of intimidation and what they look like: verbal or physical confrontation, physical intimidation, flyers threatening jail time, again, like misinformation that people are, potentially handing out at busy polling locations, vandalism of polling places, threats that are made by an employer to vote one way or another, occupying the parking lot, so people just loitering, like big men with weapons loitering in the parking lot of a polling location or an early vote location. All of that is intimidation. Next slide, please. Who's who on election day? As I mentioned, you are part of a larger team that is there all to support each other. Some of the people that you should know that you're working alongside of. Nonpartisan poll monitors. These are the largest number of people that we have as a part of the EP team are poll monitors, and their job is to distribute literature that help people know what their rights are on election day. They distribute yard signs with the EP hotline number. They check the way that this works when they sign up for to be a poll monitor is that they sign up for a polling location, and then that they are given like 1 or 2 additional polling locations that are close by to check on. And they basically are roving. So they would report to their first place. They take a note. Are there the proper signs there? They look for anybody who needs help. They look if there's like long lines. They have a checklist of things basically to say, okay, everything here looks great. Then they might move on to their next place. And within a 2-hour shift, they would visit at least each location 1 time. Command center volunteers are people who are monitoring the hotline. So I, for example, that day, that's what I'm doing. I'm monitoring the hotline all day. And most people, when they call into the hotline, they would have their question answered right away. If they file a complaint, then that gets elevated to us, and we see, what do we need to do in order to resolve this complaint. Poll monitors and command center are your support, right? So again, you are primarily there for pastoral care, and mitigating any kind of like escalated situations. Poll monitors are there to help you with all these like any kind of like questions or other technical problems that might arise. And again, just as a reminder, partisan election observers are only there to observe, and they are allowed inside. Next slide, please. And those are our election protection hotlines. It is available in English, of course, to call or text, but it's also available in Spanish and Arabic and numerous Asian and Pacific languages. And I think that's it for my section. Yep, thank you.
NASDAQ, one of the attendees wanted to verify that you said peacekeepers cannot be within 100 feet of the station. Can you verify?
That's correct. Peacekeepers cannot go within the 100-foot line unless somebody asks them to. So if somebody with a disability or somebody with like a language barrier asks for your assistance, then you may accompany that person past that 100-foot line.
And if the line is outside of the 100-foot line, which often happens, then people usually cannot go within 10 feet of the people that are standing in line, unless, of course, you're asked and you're accompanying them. If you have to go in for an intervention and you ask them, can I come and speak with you? Then you're allowed to go and be with them.
That's right. Thank you, Joan.
Okay.
I have a question for Nazik. I'm sorry. Oh, there it says raise hand. Well, let's pretend I raised my hand like I was supposed to.
Okay.
I have a question for Nazik. So if somebody gets to their polling place and finds out that they're one of the lucky 27,000 voters that got purged recently, is that it for them, or is there any appeal, or is that a provisional
So
vote?
most likely anybody that is on that list was purged from the voter rolls for inactivity. In that case, I would still advise that they, 1, call election protection and let us know. 2, vote the provisional ballot, because that will put them back on the voter list and reactivate their voter registration, basically. However, like, it is a system that is prone to human error. And so is there a possibility that, somebody, got kicked off of the rolls, but they actually have not been an inactive voter, like they voted sometime in the last 4 years? It is a possibility. And if that is the case, then they should call us, so that we will probably at that point get in touch with ACLU Ohio and have to get like legal involved. In that case, what would happen is they're probably still going to vote a provisional ballot, but between that ballot and the verification deadline the following Monday, we will help to like make sure that that their vote actually does count.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Very good. Well, there are 2 key components to being a peacekeeper. I mean, all of the wonderful stuff that Nazik's been talking about, poll monitors have more of that to deal with. You have to deal with prevention of upsetness, shall we say, because that covers a whole range of things, and intervention or de-escalation if there's agitation. And this is all offered in an attitude of nonviolence. Susan.
Thanks, Joan. Yeah, we the nonviolent thing is really important, and I'm glad we're stressing the pastoral care thing, because you very rarely see any violence, but violence can be physical, it can be emotional, it can be verbal, and so we're keeping our eyes out for all of that and and providing a presence. But the goal is to win people over by showing them love. Just win them over, even if they, get on the nerve that you hate even anybody looking at. Just win them over. People have been conditioned by their environment, and this environment has been very salty for everybody. Nonviolence forces a new environment, and it allows people to act and live and react in a different way. But peacekeepers are called to get them to understand that. Bernard Lafayette, who worked in the civil rights movement in the 60s, said it's unusual but genuine behavior has the potential to arrest the conscience of your assailant. Meaning, if you just go and you're just like, it's me and you. I know you're in a place, you're in a state. I just want to listen to you. It's amazing how powerful that is. And having clergy garb, the pins and hats and the stoles and all of that stuff really does seem to be a good tool to calm people down. Lafayette says it's one thing to be concerned about a problem, another to take action, and a whole different kind of action that has the potential to bring about changes and solve the problem. So peacekeepers are there by their presence. You're practicing the ministry of presence, and that is what peacekeeping is all about. Next slide, please. So nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. A lot of people say, "Oh, nonviolence means that you're a punk and you're weak." No, it takes a lot of strength to be nonviolent, physically, emotionally, spirit, body language. All of that stuff counts. The beloved community is the framework for the future. We are supposed to attack the forces of evil, not the persons doing the evil. We're supposed to accept suffering without retaliation for the sake of the cause to achieve the goal. And I always say in our trainings that everybody's not called to do this kind of work. In the 60s, they had trainings, and, when you went through the trainings, and they were told by Reverend Jim Lawson, you have to be prepared to be beaten, to be arrested, or to be killed. And so they went through these just god awful trainings. And some people just said, nope, this is not what God called me to do. But there are other ways that you can participate nonviolently in the whole voting scenario without being on the front line. So there's room for everybody. We're supposed to accept the suffering. We're supposed to avoid internal violence of the spirit, of their spirits, and of our spirits. Okay, so it's we have to guard ourselves, and that's why I always emphasize that if this is not what you do, then you don't do it. Or if you're in a scenario and or you can feel your adrenaline working and your blood rising and your face getting hot, probably it's not the situation for you to be in. So we have to know ourselves, and we have to understand that the universe is on the side of justice. It's said, Dr. King said, sometimes it takes longer for the internal scars to heal than the external ones. So if you feel like something's going wrong on your inside, step away, call one of your fellow peacekeepers to handle the situation that is really not for you on that day at that moment. Next slide, please. So the key to it is listening. It sounds really, really just really basic, listening to people, because it's amazing how many people are not listened to and how many people do not feel heard or affirmed. So we have to understand that difference is not deficient. We tend to react against people who are different, and we regard them as objects and not as human beings. And when we react violently, we are regarding people as objects, like they don't deserve to be heard. What causes the anger? Anger comes when people feel they don't have the power to make things different. A lot of people are upset now and have been upset for a long time because they feel like their government and their elected officials have failed them and they feel powerless. The worst kind of violence is where people go from being persecuted to being silenced. And that's called negative peace. Listening to people really does work because their silence is addressed. Their silence is addressed, and they are shown respect. Nonviolence is as old as the history of mankind. Nonviolence is described as being what love is all about. It's based on agape love. You love another human being who is different from you, and you expect nothing in return. It doesn't mean if you love somebody that they become your best friend. That's not what it's about. It is about respecting the internal and external personage of a person. That's what it's about. So our struggle, for some of us, depending on who shows up and who says what, will be to control our own anger, our own tribalism. If you are immersed in the work, Dr. Lafayette said, nobody can take your life because you have already given it to the work of nonviolence. Next slide.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Now, those of you who have had pastoral care training or any introduction to counseling or therapy work, you probably know the Clara process. And that's what we're urging you to engage in. And I will be sending these slides out to you so you can review them at any time. But the Clara process is very simple. First is to calm and center yourself. You are to be a less anxious presence. There is no such thing as a non-anxious presence, but you can be less anxious. You can appear calm and centered, even if you are not. You can also look at yourself so that you avoid aggressive gestures or postures. Calm, center. Listen. Susan's already told you about listening. Let the person vent. Listen for feelings, needs, values. You know this. Listen. But then you acknowledge that you heard them. Okay? Acknowledge those feelings. It's not about agreeing with their position. It's just saying, I hear you. I sense your aggravation at this situation. I hear your concern for safety or for the process. I hear you. Then we respond. So after you acknowledge it, if there's further threat of anger, you can offer some open-ended questions to get deeper, address the issue. Will you tell me more about your concerns? Maybe step aside over here so we don't block the line. I understand you have every right to feel angry here, but it's not okay to threaten people here. Ask a very clear request. You respond, and then you assess. And trust your instincts here, because if de-escalation is not working, you stop and you call for help. Now, next few slides, we're going to unpack this process just a bit. Susan? You're muted, dear.
Sorry. The first thing you do when you become a peacekeeper is you get to know who your buddies are. Who are the other peacekeepers there? You really have to know who the other peacekeepers are and who are the poll workers, because that's your team. You may be in a situation where you do feel your adrenaline, running and your face getting hot and your, insides, screaming at you. You may need to just have a hand signal or something to your team members. You guys need to know who you are by name. You need to know where you got to be standing so that you know where to look or where to motion if you need help. You need to introduce you, because poll workers and peacekeepers don't just automatically start talking. You identify, you find, because the poll workers are identified as well. And you have all of this bright yellow stuff, so you will do all of that. You also, how we teach is to get to know if there are police officers out there. Introduce yourself to the police officers so that they know who you are and you know who they are. You observe, where your allies are located. You notice the environment. Is anything coming up the street? You observe everything about you. If you see, for instance, because there's all types of ways for voters to be intimidated. If you see people, in the parking lot getting people's license plate numbers, you would tell that to the poll workers. So you see what I'm saying, that you have to know who each other and your own roles. But what we're trying to do is de-escalate, and we're trying to call police as the last effort, as the last resort. So you want to know who's intimidating and how they're intimidating. So you have to look around and see. If you see anybody talking really loud, you do the peacekeeper thing. Or if you look at somebody and it looks like it's almost already physically violent, you tell the poll workers and you call 1-866-OUR-VOTE. So you observe the actors in the situation. You look at the mood and the body language. You look at who's being harmed and who's doing the harming. You look at the people around. What's going on? If you can see their faces, a lot of times people won't say anything and they don't want to get out of line, but they don't want to be in the midst of this, confusion that's going on. So you look at their faces, and you just, again, you can't go to people unless they ask you, but you can just kind of stand close so that you can make eye contact with them and you can kind of see. They might say, come and help. You have to be observant and watch and see the faces and the body language. And then if you need another peacekeeper or a poll monitor or a poll worker, you do your hand signal or whatever it is so that you can get someone to help you. Next.
Okay.
Faith leaders
But
are supposed to wear appropriate clerical garb. I've already shared that. I'm sorry, Joan. Am I on your slide? Am I on your slide?
go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. The symbolism really is powerful. And I always lift this one up because Dan Clark always tells me to dress like a pastor. And I fight it because I don't know why, but it really does work. If you have on a stole and you have a hat on, they respect that. They respect that. Introduce yourself and ask if you can help, and always ask for consent. If they don't want you to help, then don't do it. Don't automatically go over and do something. I liken it to when I was in seminary, we were doing pastoral care training. You don't go in and just automatically pray with people. Some people don't want you to pray for them or with them. So you just stand there. How can I help you? Don't tell them what to do. And instead, listen to them. Just listen to them and respect them. If they need more space, and then work out with your partners in advance when and how to call for help. We've already said that, but we're just kind of repeating it. Go ahead, Joan. I'm sorry.
It's good to know that you do have partners there in poll monitors, and you should be with another peacekeeper, because the goal is to prevent situations from escalating. That's our whole thing. How will they know that? I see the question here. How will they know that you're there to help? Well, you'll have on this great big orange hat that says Peacekeeper on it with your phone number, the 866 phone number, and you have this great big button. And then if you're clergy, you'll have a stole or maybe a collar, and you'll be walking around the line. Okay. I mean, that's how you know, how they know. But the goal is to keep situations from escalating. We may have offline protesters at these events, if there are lines particularly. Harassment folk who are yelling things from the sideline. Don't focus on them. You're not going to stop them from yelling ugly, nasty things to the people in line. That's just the truth. But focus on the voters instead. If you see somebody who is visibly upset or getting emotional because of all of the harassment or the protesters or what they're yelling, that's when you go and you ask the person in line if you can help. Focus on the voter. They need to stay in line. They don't need to be upset enough that they leave. Help distract them maybe a bit. Talk about the weather, something else, anything else. And polite apologies are always a good way to get things a little calmer. Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't understand this or that or the other. Is there something I can help you with? That's a way of just kind of sliding in there. But this is all part of prevention, and observation is a big part of prevention as well. Susan?
So you breathe first. In this election, we may have a little bit more, a few more cantankerous people because of the issue and all of the misinformation and disinformation that's been going on. And you say abortion, and it's like starting World War VI in a second. And so there may be people out on the lines who are just ready to fight, just in general. That means you really have to go in breathing. You got to go in breathing and getting yourself centered so that you don't react, because it's easy when they're saying hateful things. It's easy to react. So you have to watch your body language first. You have to do that. And then be discreet about calling somebody to help you if somebody's getting really, really, really like in your face. Don't let anybody get into your face. If they're trying to get in your face, that's total intimidation. Back up, get somebody to come with you, to one of your partners to come and assist you. Get somebody to call the 1-866 our vote, but don't let them get in your face. Just back up and say, okay, I see that you're upset, but just tell me what's going on. Just tell me why. And again, I'm being repetitive, but it really does work. Introduce yourself as a peacekeeper. I'm not. One time a lady said, "You're trying to tell." No, I'm not trying to tell you how to vote. I don't care how you vote. I just want everybody to be able to vote, and you have to tell people that this is not a partisan operation. This is we're out here, and all of us are out here, and all of us count. You count, I count, she counts. So all this is, nobody's telling you, nobody's telling anybody how to vote. Focus on the common ground rather than grievances. Everybody's been standing out in the cold. So are you a little bit cold, or if it's warm, are you hot? You have to acknowledge the humanity of people. And we have to respect this right to vote. That's what we are. That's why we're American citizens. You make space for conflicting parties to start over, acknowledge where we are now, what the resolution might be, Don't try to engage with large groups of agitated people. There may be times when, you know, the peacekeeper presence is not enough. And that's when you do call the poll workers. And if the poll workers can't do anything, then you call the police. But remember, please remember that police, for a lot of communities, I don't know about the communities in which you live, but in my communities, the police are the last people you want over there because you don't trust them. I don't know how that is in other communities, but we want our baseline thing for us as peacekeepers is calling the police over your last resort. Next slide.
Okay, so if the situation, however, goes beyond simple anger or people arguing in line, and it's escalating, then you bring in some of the de-escalation techniques. You know, watch your body language. Again, we've said that several times. Remember, don't tell them what to do. That only makes it worse. It fuels the fire. Basic limited eye contact and no touching. These are pastoral care techniques, you know, don't grab their arm or anything like that. Speak softly if they are yelling, but don't argue with them. Once again, listening, giving space for the sharing of their feelings and why they feel that way. Now, if the agitation is high, if it's growing, try containment and distance. You know, I'm sorry, I can't hear you here. Can we walk together and talk about this? We won't go far from the line and they'll let you back in, but let's go talk about this. Okay. Now, if that doesn't work, then there is a technique, removal, surround and removal tactic that you do with 2 or 3 people. And this is pretty high de-escalation work with 2 or 3 people who stand kind of on the side or behind the person. And you talk to them and say, can we take a walk together? But whatever you do, don't put yourself in harm's way. That, you know, if somebody's getting really agitated and physical, don't go there. Don't be near them. And if the situation moves beyond simple containment, then call the 866-hour vote, tell the poll workers, and call for help and delay until help arrives. There may be other people in line that are getting fearful and may try to walk away from somebody who's agitated. Put your focus on the people that are not agitated or that are fearful rather than the person that can't be contained or talked to. See what I mean? Okay, Susan?
So poll workers are trained to call police in situations of tension that you can't de-escalate. But so that's why I said at the very beginning, introduce yourself to the police officers, any who are on site as a peacekeeper. You don't touch a police officer ever. That might be taken as assault or resisting arrest. You don't argue or get upset or hostile or speak in a confrontational tone. I think you guys all know that. Recording interactions is fine. It's okay. You can legally do that. And you advise everyone to keep calm. Just keep calm, including the police officer. You know, just, you know, it's not a big deal, officer, but we probably need a little bit of your help because we're not having as much luck with this as we wanted to have. If arrests occur, you're not, number one, we don't expect peacekeepers to be arrested. I don't want you to be afraid of that. But if they're kind of threatening you, because sometimes that happens, you ask if you were being detained, and if not, you are free to walk away. Those are your right. That's your right. If arrested, then by all means, don't say anything. Don't say anything. I want to see a lawyer. You can say that, and then don't say anything else. Don't talk because it might damage you or it might damage others. Again, this election might be a little bit more contentious because of the A word. It's just like crazy, crazy, crazy. And so, and a lot of the contention and a lot of the yucky stuff that you get might come from very religious people. You might expect that. I was in a session at a church, a very conservative Black church, and boy, they attack like with poison darts. It's awful. And I was able to breathe. And it's okay. And my spirit says, keep calm. Don't, just because this lady just called you a name, just don't do that. Don't do that. And one lady said to me, you're a minister. How can you? Because I said I'm pro-life and I'm pro-choice. How can you sleep at night? And I think Jesus told me to bow my head for a minute, which I did. And then I raised it up and I said, I sleep pretty well. But this isn't really all about abortion. This is about your rights. This is about freedom. And I was able to de-escalate even that part of that service where people were getting higher and higher and higher because they were insulted. that a religious person would be in favor of choice. So you may have some of those types of situations. So that's why I say breathe, know where the police officers are, and just, talk yourself into remaining calm. Next slide, please.
Okay.
So there are underlying vulnerabilities for political violence in the US. I actually didn't know that this was such an organized thing to handle political violence until a couple of weeks ago when I went to DC for a conference. But political violence is defined as violence aimed at political ends, controlling or changing who benefits from and who participates fully in the United States political, economic, and socio-cultural life. It's protecting who stays in power. Next slide, please. The International Foundation for Election Systems defines electoral violence as, quote, any harm or threat of harm to any persons or property involved in the election process or the election process itself during the election period. And this is as American as is American pie. It's just amazing. Next slide. Underlying vulnerabilities, high levels of elite factionalization. Elite factionalization refers to when a country's political elites and parties engage in zero-sum winner-takes-all politics to advance their own group's interest at the expense of the collectives. And actually, when people are aware of that, that makes them angry too. So you might have people angry about the A word, but you might have people who are angry because of gerrymandering or something. You have to kind of be aware of some of the reasons why people might be agitated. High levels of societal polarization, particularly affective polarization. Affective societal polarization is the kind we are witnessing in the United States, and it refers to political disagreements that stem from how people feel about those on the other side of the political aisle, rather than a particular issue or policy. Next slide. So in that situation at that church where I was, and they were just really attacking. And I said, listen, this is what I need to share with you, that all life has value. And I like the little babies have value, but so do the people who are giving birth to the babies. And I'm here to tell you that I want that freedom. And if it were my daughter or my granddaughter who, needed, was in a life-defining or life-violating situation, I would want her to be able to choose what she wanted to do. I don't want the government. So that kind of calmed them down, But continuing, the underlying vulnerabilities arise in hate and dangerous rhetoric. It is awful now. Hateful and dangerous rhetoric divides societies into an us in need of protection and a threatening from them, and targets groups that are already marginalized. Exposure to such rhetoric not only impacts extreme segments of society, but influences perceptions of what is acceptable among society at large. If I hear the term one more time, red meat, I'm going to die. I don't even buy red meat anymore because I'm so tired of that phrase that comes up all of the time. And then weakening institutions, countries that are characterized as partial democracies rather than full democracies or autocracies are at the highest risk of violence. Backsliding in democratic institutions and norms, as well as decreased legitimacy and trust for democratic institutions, increase the risk of violence. So some people will be out there in the lines and they don't even know if they believe in voting anymore. All of that serves to cause violence and a sense of unsettlement. Next slide. We give one example of political violence. It's the one everybody knows about that happened in 1965 when people wanted to walk from Selma to Montgomery for the right to vote, and the violence that happened there. There was intimidation first with the police on the horses, with the billy clubs, and then as they started across, and then the signal was given that the law enforcement could attack the people. It was awful. You won't see anything like that, but you might see a police officer wielding a billy club, or you might. One of the direct actions I participated in, we were walking in the streets, and I was walking next to this horse, and I didn't realize how big horses were. But I thought, if that horse gets angry, steps on me or looks at me, I'm going to be, horse meat for sure. No pun intended. So you might have something that looks like a prelude to political violence. It won't be like this, I promise you, but it may be something that intimidates you. So we're on the lookout for that.
We also have another training that you can take for emergencies at the polls. It's specifically focused on that. And it's taught by an officer, a state police officer who is Susan's new son-in-law at Thursday, November 2nd at 7 p.m. and there's a registration link that I will email to. It's unlikely that you will need the skills that he talks about, but we offer it just to be prepared in this day and age, because, you know, who knows when you might need something like that. So I will email you that information, and you can register for the emergencies at the polls training.
And I just want to say that I asked for that training to be in, because even though it's not pleasant to speak about, so many people are walking around with guns, that I asked out loud. So if we're out in the lines and somebody shows up with a gun, what do we do? And I just really think people ought to know what to do. It is very unlikely that it'll happen, but if it does, I think it's poor planning if we don't at least prepare ourselves and our teams, and therefore be able to help the people who might be affected by somebody showing up like that. So that's why. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, and he also does a good job, Alton does a great job of telling you when not to be concerned, because we do have open carry in Ohio. And he gives you the signs, you know, when somebody's carrying a rifle or something, when not to be concerned, as you look at them and observe their stance and where the gun's located. Okay. So that little logo in the corner of the slide, that's what's on your Peacekeeper hat and your Peacekeeper button, and it's in that bright yellow color. So you will be noticed, my friends. And you're going to receive an email with information about how to sign up for shifts on the early voting weekend and on election day, and how to get your buttons and hats from the regional lead near you. We've got 8 regional leads across the state. And we have one who works with the various counties where we don't have a regional lead nearby. We'll include contact information for veteran Peacekeeper mentors. Beth is one of them. Reverend Chris Jones-Levy is another. And they can answer questions, or, you know, if you just need to talk to them. We will be using what is called Sign Up Genius as an app to schedule times for major boards of election on Saturday and Sunday of early voting. And we're going to use it as well for shifts for the poll locations in your region on election day. I'll get to a question just a second. On election day, we're going to have you sign up just like the poll monitors for one particular polling place that you choose, and then assign you a couple of others that are nearby, so that during your shift, you can patrol around those. Also, too, if something happens, I may call on you and ask you to move to another polling place that is hopefully nearby. And there's a question. Yes. Question?
Well, I won't be doing it. Is it me?
Yeah,
Yep,
no, I'm
see
sorry, hon.
you guys.
Yes, you got your
Okay.
hand up. Sorry.
I won't be doing peacekeeping on election day. I'll be doing regional lead stuff. So my question has to do with more logistics. So we're in Athens County. I'm hoping I'll have a few poll monitors in adjoining counties. A, how do I pick a key location to assign a peacekeeper to? And B, how do I decide, how do you, I mean, there was one slide that said, you know, if something isn't working, call the hotline and then wait for help. Now, I don't think anybody is physically coming to Athens County in that kind of a situation. So how do I deploy my few peacekeepers across Athens County so that they will be, I mean, how far away should you be from a conflict situation? I'm not asking this very well.
No, I understand. I understand.
When we can't really anticipate
Right,
what's
right.
going to happen where.
And it does take some time to get there. Now, actually, I'm the one that deploys the peacekeepers. And I'll be
Okay,
texting
well,
them because I'm monitoring the report line that Nozick is on. So I see when there are issues coming up, and the people who are doing the election protection on the command center will say, hey, we need a peacekeeper at polling location ABC. And so I'll text somebody who's nearby, because I know who the peacekeepers are since I've deployed them. And I say, can you get over to polling location ABC? And I'll send another one too, if need be. So that's something that I have to worry about. And people sign up for the different polling locations when they sign up on the Sign Up Genius for a particular time. They'll sign up for a particular polling location too. And then I will send them a couple of others that are nearby. But like I said, I can always call them or text them. Text is really good, guys. I really need your phone numbers in there. But text is really good because then I can ask, can you go to ABC? Does that make sense?
Yeah, what's a general maximum amount of time that it would take someone to get from A to B
Well,
before
it
the situation
really
it
depends.
varies?
We don't
Okay.
know. And even
Yeah,
if the person who is agitated has already left, there is pastoral care to be done with the people left in the line. We know that for fact. If Chris were here, she would tell you a very recent story that just happened a few days ago in early voting. And there was a really nasty, ugly person at Franklin County, and people were upset by it. He left, thank God. But when Chris got there, she had to do some pastoral care with the folk that had been insulted and harassed. So even though if the person may leave, there's still work for us to be done. Okay, I see that Karen has a question. Karen Diebel.
Yes, it's Corinne Dybel. Yes,
I'm sorry.
I, that's okay. You pronounced it like it's spelled.
Sorry.
Um, it's quite all right, thanks. I don't own a cell phone, so I don't do texts. Am I still going to be of any service?
Well, yes. And if you could sign up during early voting and you'd be assigned to a particular polling location to the Board of Elections. Now, if you're there and you're doing peacekeeping and you need to get a hold of 866 Our Vote, then you'd have to find a poll monitor. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Also, if you're having
So I
trouble,
could,
go ahead.
so you're suggesting I should do early voting on that weekend rather
Right.
than on election day?
Right, because on election day, I may have to call or text and say, please go to ABC, please go to XYZ. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks.
All righty. We're going to give you direct phone and text contacts, but you'll have to just get a hold of a poll monitor on election day if you need 866 Our Vote. When I send you email, by the way, it's going to be labeled right up front, Peacekeepers, in capital letters, so you know that that is important to you. And of course, we're going to share these slides as well. Okay, logistics. Signing up for early voting slots, we've got that already set up on the Sign Up Genius. I'll email the link to you. And then when we get the election day assignment set up, we just got the names of the polling locations today. So give us a couple of days to type them up because it's a lot.
Yeah.
But I will then email that link to you as well. I will also share a link to this recording. Okay. And I will also share Veteran Peacekeeper mentor contact information. If you're on the line and you got a question, then you can call them or call me. Okay, because I will be monitoring the whole thing. So will Susan Smith. So we'll give you information for both of us. Now, a couple of bits of preparation. Wear a mask if the air is smoky, or if you have a cough or concern, right? Bring a folding chair if you want. You know, if you need to sit down a little bit, some of us are a little old, right? My knees don't work too well. Prepare for the weather, please. Umbrella, raincoat, coat. Charge your phone. Bring a charger battery if you got one. You'll be in luck there. Figure out where the bathroom is. That's part of observation, my friends. You might have to ask people to hold a spot in line for a voter who needs to use it if the lines are long and they're afraid of losing their space. You can help with that. Be wary of people asking about illegal things like voting for someone else, voting from another precinct, any of that stuff. No, don't do it. Bring food and water and a little bit extra for others if you can, depending, especially on the weather. Faith leaders, wear clerical garb. I'm going to remind you of that one. Greet poll monitors and election officials again to introduce yourself so they all know who you are and don't think of you as just some strange person running around in a yellow hat and a big button. But don't enter the polling site. Don't interfere with voters' access, even if they're angry, ugly people. Don't interfere with them. Don't engage in partisan discussion under any circumstances. Don't argue with them, and it's going to be hard to keep your own peace. Don't incite or provoke. Don't promote candidates or issues. I mean, that's a hard one. Oh, I don't know what to do. You're clergy. Can you please tell me how I should vote about issue 1? No. Don't answer questions you don't know, and don't argue with election officials or workers. Call 866-OUR-VOTE. The people on the 866-OUR-VOTE command center hotline, they can call the boards of election. They can argue with the election officials. You can't, okay? They got the lawyers. Yes, 866-OUR-VOTE. It's going to be on your hat and your button, so you can't forget the number, okay? Okay, let's just talk with Beth a little bit. Beth, rather than me go through these scenarios, why don't you, you can also put some questions in the chat while we're talking with Beth. Beth, talk to me about some of the stuff you've seen.
Yeah, well, I also want to kind of offer a little advice and a little clarifying stuff from somebody who's been on the ground. I did this training the first time I was a peacekeeper, and I came out and I was like, I got to do all this stuff, and I was nervous and edgy. But at that time, way at the beginning, they called us poll chaplains, and I understand why we switched to peacekeeper. But that sense of being a chaplain, that worked for me. I have served probably anywhere between 40 and 60 hours as a peacekeeper, and 2 to 3 of those have had any manner of engagement in them at all. So when we think about being clergy, being social workers, being the people we're being sent out to do something very unique, and that is to be who we are called to be. We are a ministry of presence. We are separated from it. I love the nonviolence training slides, because we have that training because we pray that we never have to use it. But absolutely nonpartisan, absolutely 100% respectful, absolutely the same way we are walking through the halls, greeting people after church, when we have difficult committee meetings, how we are that way. We have those unique gifts. And so what I have found is that I'm usually alone. I'm in the Toledo area, and I actually live an hour away from the closest polling places I go to. So I am often alone, but I am never isolated. Joan is right there. I'm getting these texts. I liked having 4 different sites the last time, because I was able to drive around and kind of see what's going on. But what I do, just practical nuts and bolts from questions I've seen from you. When I get to the polling place, I park kind of far back. That's respectful to the people who are voting. I look around, I see what's going on there. Usually nothing at all. Very seldom is there even a line past the 100-foot mark. So then I kind of walk around the area, and I do my very first moment in a new polling place, I break that rule for just 1 second, and I incredibly respectfully find the person farthest outside who is a poll worker. Often they're standing outside. If they're not, I stick my head in the door and I smile and I wave a little bit. Somebody almost always comes over. I thank them for the work they're doing. I tell them who I am. I'm clergy. I'm wearing a clerical collar, and I'll be in and out through the day. And then I don't cross that line again. I stay out of the 100-foot mark. People will approach you, especially if you're in clerical garb, to talk about all manner of things. I love that we are not of either side of this, that we are even beyond nonpartisan, that we're there to care for them. And when I'm able to pull myself out of that, then I can provide care equally on either side without compromising myself at all. So that's what I do. Because I'm an hour away, I bring a lawn chair. If the weather's nice, I sit way out as far as I can get and still see. Make sure they know who you are if you're going to do that, or you will be detained. I learned that the hard way. They came and asked me some questions. As soon as they knew who I was, they were cool. Or I'll go and hang out at a coffee shop or something, and something will arise and I'll be sent there. The most fun, the quickest story I'm going to tell you, because I've had some engagements with people and come away unscathed. I've had to talk with the police. I was not arrested. I respectfully walked away. The key is respect. My favorite one was being deployed because there was a marching band at a school blocking the polling place. And for some reason, everybody went straight to boiling point. This was somehow subverting democracy. They're doing this on purpose. You got to go help us, Beth. Well, I was raised by a band director. I knew it had nothing to do with the election. So when I got there, the band was still standing there playing. As I was headed for the band director, he marched them away. They were practicing marching and playing, and that's where they were. They had knocked the signs down. So I went to the doorway and waved to let them know that the signs had been knocked down. They came out and fixed them. And then I unruffled some feathers for a while. But if you're lucky enough to get deployed because there's a marching band subverting democracy, it's fun. Joan, is there anything else I can help with?
Well, Beth will be on her cell phone as
Yes.
well during this period, and you'd be able to call and ask or text and ask her questions too. But 866 Our Vote is where you get the logistics and the more legal questions answered, as well as reporting any incidents, so we know what to do.
They're wonderful. Don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, don't be afraid to ask.
And there's my number.
Okay, and we'll put it in the Peacekeeper's email, follow-up email that I send out. Okay, any other questions? Yeah, I see a hand up from this Karen, right? Okay.
Hi, Karen Skubic.
Okay.
I'm having a hard time picturing how this would work. I'm in Wayne County, which is fairly rural. If you don't know where it is, I'm part of the Unitarian Universalist congregation there, and I will not be a peacekeeper this year because I'm a poll worker, and the poll workers are all inside. The peacekeepers, if there are any, they would be outside. And yes, I could knock on a window, but typically there's nobody at all outside. So do you just not bother to deploy in rural places where everybody just goes inside and you can't see anything going on? Like, would you deploy someone like me next year to Akron or Canton, something like that?
Well, actually, we have had some issues in the rural areas, especially like Stark County, things like that. So it's not unusual. Most of Ohio is rural. Now, for the early voting on the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, there's going to be people at the boards of election in each county. There'll be a lot of people at the boards of election in each county. And the chances of some ugly stuff and some harassment does seem to rise in the rural counties. Okay, I mean, that's what we've seen. I've seen anyway. So yeah, we would post people at the boards of election if we've got enough peacekeepers. Otherwise, we would call nearby peacekeepers on call if there's something that's needed and pastoral care is needed. For election day itself, once again, the League of Women Voters is giving me a list of the polling places where there'll be the most people or where we have seen the most issues rise in the past. And those are the ones that I'll be putting on the list that folk can sign up for. So no, we don't ignore the rural areas at all. But yes, it might take us longer to get somebody there, but there's always pastoral care work to do. Does that help?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. And then another from Jenny. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, thanks for calling me. My experience the last time I did this was the obnoxious behavior came from supporters of candidates in early voting sessions. Husband of a judge, something like that, who was very belligerent and worked up and kind of fighting and confronting the supporters of the opponent. And so it wasn't the voters got to witness all of this. I think, I thought that was reportable.
Yes.
And it got reported, but I just want to make sure that people do know that sometimes it's not citizens. Well, I mean, they're all citizens, but I mean, not just ordinary voters, but it is actually people with political affiliations who have the most, I guess, to lose, and are not well behaved.
Not well behaved, but thank heaven you were there, and some unruffled some feathers afterwards, and that's the job. Okay, any other questions before we wrap up? Oh yes, okay. You have to excuse me,
Mary.
guys. Okay, I've had
No.
2 eye surgeries, so I can't read very well. Okay,
Well, not a problem. My name's sometimes tricky. It's Marin Marshall.
Sharon. Okay.
I'm curious, when you talked about inviting somebody, do you want to step aside or just take a short walk? They'll get back in line.
Yeah.
What if would people in line necessarily let somebody go back in line, or could that become a point of contention?
Well, it usually,
I would think that you clear it out before you ask the persons, she
Yeah.
wants to get out,
Take my-
go, and she come back. Yeah, I think people are pretty okay with that.
yeah.
Okay, good. That was my only question.
Especially if you're solving somebody who's upset or belligerent or angry or stepped on somebody else's toes.
Okay, that makes good sense. Thank you.
Okay. All right, my friends. I know we're a little over time, so if there's other questions that come up, you'll be able to email me and email Susan, because you'll have our email addresses and our phone numbers. Okay. So I'm going to close then with another little quote, and this one is from the New Testament, from 2 Timothy. And it says that God did not give us a spirit of timidity, but a spirit of power, a spirit of love. That's what we bring to this work. And of course, our self-discipline. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you so much for volunteering to be a peacekeeper. And we are absolutely thrilled. And you will have a wonderful time doing this and helping make our voting experience a calm, peaceful, welcoming event. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. Thank you.